This is a small house located in a quiet neighborhood in Chicago. Neighbors often see the man living there as friendly, always smiling, throwing parties, and even dressing up as a clown to perform for children at charity events. Everyone thought he was a model citizen, kind and trustworthy. But beneath that house lies a cramped, filthy, and dark crawlspace, where 29 bodies were buried for years. It was where that man killed teenagers one by one and hid their remains right under his feet, all while living a normal life above ground. He wasn't a killer with a terrifying appearance. On the contrary, he behaved like an ordinary person, a decent neighbor. But inside, he was a cold-blooded predator. He lured his victims, young men aged 14 to 21, with promises of jobs, money, or simply a drink. Once they entered his house, the door closed, and no one ever walked out. John Wayne Gacy killed 33 people. 29 of them were found beneath the house at 8213 Summerdale Avenue, while the remaining 4 were dumped in the river. John Wayne Gacy was born on March 17, 1942 in Chicago, into a Polish Catholic family. On the surface, his family seemed normal. His father was a laborer, and his mother was a homemaker. But beneath that facade lay violence and fear. Gacy's father was an alcoholic who frequently beat his son. He called Gacy weak and not a real man. The abuse was constant, and Gacy developed deep-seated fear and trauma. Each time he was beaten, his mother could only hold him afterward but couldn't do anything to stop it. At age 7, Gacy was sexually abused by a family friend. He never told anyone. That experience left deep scars, making him increasingly indifferent to human life, especially those weaker than him. At 11, Gacy suffered a head injury from a swing accident. From then on, he would faint for no apparent reason. Doctors diagnosed him with a mild aneurysm, but his father refused to believe it, accusing him of faking it. As he grew older, Gacy was bullied for being overweight and clumsy. He had no real friends. Inside, resentment, insecurity, and rage festered. He craved recognition, but was met with mockery. In adulthood, Gacy tried to fit in by joining clubs, volunteering, and even becoming a member of the Junior Chamber of Commerce. But all of it was a mask for the monster growing inside him. A man who craved control, who enjoyed inflicting pain, especially on young men. At 18, Gacy ran away to Las Vegas. He worked in a mortuary where he first came into close contact with corpses. One night, Gacy claimed he climbed into a coffin and lay beside the body of a young man. From then on, he felt a strange comfort with death and lifeless bodies. Gacy later returned to Chicago, married his boss's daughter, and had 2 children. He started a small construction business called PDM Contractors. By day, Gacy lived as a normal man. By night, he quietly hunted down drifting young men. In 1968, Gacy was arrested for luring and sexually assaulting 2 teenage boys. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but was paroled after just 18 months for good behavior. After his release, his wife divorced him. But he didn't stop. Instead, Gacy became even more dangerous. From 1972 to 1978, he began killing systematically. Whenever he felt stressed, Gacy would seek a new victim. His house, particularly the crawl space, became the perfect hiding place for bodies. He dug shallow graves beneath the floor, each one a secret tomb. Over 6 years, from 1972 to 1978, young men vanished from Chicago's streets one by one. All were males aged 14 to 21. Some were never reported missing. Others were listed as disappearances, but no one suspected they were buried beneath John Wayne Gacy's house. Victim number 1. On January 3, 1972, Timothy Jack McCoy, 16 years old, stopped at Chicago's Greyhound bus station while traveling home from Michigan after the holidays. He met John Wayne Gacy, who promised him a place to stay and a tour of the city. McCoy trusted him and followed him home to Norwood Park Township. The next morning, when McCoy picked up a knife to make breakfast, Gacy panicked, thinking he was being attacked. He grabbed the knife and stabbed McCoy repeatedly in the chest until he died. This was the first time Gacy felt the euphoria of bloodshed and taking a life, the beginning of his killing spree. McCoy's body was buried in the northwest corner of the crawl space and wasn't discovered until December 21, 1978. Victim number 2, 3.5 years later, in late July 1975, John Butkovic, 18 years old, a Croatian immigrant and former employee of Gacy's PDM contractors, came to Gacy's house to demand unpaid wages. After a heated argument, Gacy lured him into the garage, locked the door, handcuffed him, and strangled him with a rope. Instead of burying him in the crawl space, Gacy poured concrete over the garage floor to hide the evidence. Butkovic's body was found on December 22, 1978, beneath that very concrete. Victim number 3. On the night of April 6, 1976, Daryl Julius Sampson, 18 years old, a college freshman, left his dorm for a walk and vanished without a trace. Following his usual pattern, Gacy lured him inside with promises of work or a beer, then tricked him into a handcuff magic trick. Once restrained, Gacy sexually assaulted him before strangling him to death. Sampson's body was buried in Cluster A, a grouping of 3 bodies, in the crawl space and discovered on December 21, 1978. Victim number 4 and number 5. On May 13, 1976, Randall Wayne Reffett, 15 years old, and Samuel G. Dodd Stapleton, 14 years old, 2 high school friends, were walking home from school but never arrived. Gacy likely abducted both at once, restrained and tortured them before strangling them. He buried their bodies side by side in a double grave in the crawl space, a haunting image of 2 victims lying together. Police found them on December 21, 1978. Victim number 6. On June 3, 1976, Michael Lawrence Bonin, 17 years old, left home for a job interview with Gacy's PDM contractors and never returned. He was tricked into drinking, subjected to the handcuff trick, assaulted, and strangled with a rope. His body was buried near a drain pipe in the crawl space and found on December 21, 1978. Victim number 7. On the night of June 13, 1976, William Huey Carroll Jr., 16, was on his way to meet friends at a movie theater but never arrived. Gacy approached him as he walked, offering work or a drink, then tortured and strangled him. His body was buried near the northwest wall of the crawl space and discovered on December 21, 1978. Victim number 8. On August 5, 1976, James Byron Hawkinson, 16 years old, ran away from home to Chicago hoping to find work. Gacy lured him inside, strangled him, and buried him near the crawl space stairs. His remains weren't identified until July 19, 2017 through DNA testing. Victim number 9. On August 6, 1976, Rick Lewis Johnston, 17 years old, disappeared after a rock concert. Gacy likely lured him with job offers or a drink before strangling him. His body was buried near Hawkinson's and identified via dental records on January 1, 1979. Victims number 10 and number 11. On the afternoon of October 24, 1976, Kenneth Ray Parker, 16 years old, and his best friend Michael M. Marino, 14 years old, left home to buy groceries but never returned. Gacy likely lured them under the guise of hiring construction helpers for PDM contractors. He handcuffed them, bound them tightly, and strangled them using the twist stick method, twisting a wooden stick to tighten a rope around their necks until they suffocated or their necks snapped. Their bodies were buried side by side in the center of the crawl space and exhumed on December 21, 1978. Victim number 12. On the evening of October 26, 1976, William George Bundy, 19 years old, an electrician apprentice, told his family he was going to a party and vanished. Gacy likely drugged or intoxicated him, restrained him, tortured him, and strangled him. With the crawl space filling up, Bundy was buried in the East Central area. His remains were uncovered on December 21, 1978. Victim number 13. Francis Wayne Alexander, 21 years old, originally from North Carolina, came to Chicago for work and disappeared in mid-1976. His family assumed he had cut off contact. His body was buried near the north wall of the crawl space beneath thick concrete, requiring drilling to uncover. He remained unidentified for over 40 years until DNA testing confirmed his identity in October 2021. Victim number 14. On the night of December 12, 1976, Gregory John Godzik, 17 years old, a PDM contractor's apprentice, left home for overtime and never returned. 2 years later, police found his body in the crawl space, his hands bound behind his back and a rope around his neck. Evidence of Gacy's handcuff trick turned deadly. Victim number 15. On January 20th, 1977, John Allen Zeitz, 19 years old, a technical high school graduate, accepted Gacy's invitation for drinks and job discussion. After a few drinks, Gacy performed the handcuff trick before suddenly strangling him with a rope. His body was found in a far corner of the crawl space on December 21, 1978. Victim number 16. On March 15, 1977, John Stephen Prestige, 20 years old, who had been drifting between friends' couches, accepted Gacy's offer of a meal and a place to sleep. The handcuff trick turned into strangulation, and his body was buried near the north wall. He remained unidentified until the crawl space was excavated on December 21, 1978. Victim number 17. Matthew Walter Bowman, 17 years old, a dreamy dropout who often drifted between friends' homes, met Gacy at a bus station in summer 1976. Gacy offered him work and alcohol. Once unconscious, Bowman was restrained in the handcuff trick and strangled. His body was buried near the southwest wall and found in late 1978. Victim number 18. On September 15, 1977, Robert Gilroy Jr., 18 years old, son of a police sergeant, vanished on his way to horseback riding lessons. Gacy likely posed as a ranch owner, lured him home, and killed him. His body was buried under quicklime near a drain pipe and found in late 1978. Victim number 19. On September 25, 1977, John Anthony Mowry, 19 years old, a biomedical student, disappeared after visiting his girlfriend. The only clue was Gacy's offer of a ride. At 8213 West Summerdale, he was restrained and strangled with a garrote. His body was found in the west crawl space and identified via dental records. Victim number 20. Russell Lloyd Nelson, 21 years old. An architecture student visiting Chicago for an interview, called his mother from O'Hare Inn before vanishing. Gacy likely posed as a contractor, lured him home, and killed him. His body was found in the west crawl space among fall 1977 victims. Victim number 21. Robert David Winch, 16 years old, a former reform school resident, met Gacy at a bus station while drifting in Chicago. Lured with promises of shelter and work, he was tortured and strangled. His body was among those exhumed on December 21st to 22nd, 1978. Victim number 22. On November 18th, 1977, Tommy Joseph Bowling, 20 years old, left Bughouse Square Bar after a minor argument and vanished. Police believe Gacy approached him outside, offering shelter or job talk. At his home, Gacy performed the handcuff trick, tortured, assaulted, and strangled him. His body was buried with late 1977 victims and found on December 21, 1978. Victim number 23. On December 9, 1977, David Paul Talsma, 19 years old, left on his motorcycle, promising to return in hours. Gacy likely stopped him, pretending to ask for directions, then took him home. After the handcuff trick, he strangled him. His body was buried near the crawlspace entrance and found on December 21, 1978. Victim number 24. On February 16, 1978, William Wayne Kindred, 19 years old, left to meet his girlfriend and vanished. His clothes remained in his Melrose apartment. Police believe Gacy abducted him near Diversey Broadway, drugged or intoxicated him, restrained him, and strangled him. His body was buried near the north wall and identified via dental records on May 21, 1979. Victim number 25. In mid-June 1978, Timothy David O'Rourke, 20 years old, disappeared after leaving to buy cigarettes. With the crawl space full, Gacy admitted dumping his body in the Des Plaines River. It surfaced on June 30, 1978, hands bound and strangled, later identified via dental records. Victim number 26. Frank William Landingen, 19 years old, a loner with no missing person report, was last seen near Lincoln Park. On November 4, 1978, Gacy dumped his body in the river. His second victim disposed of this way. Fishermen found it on November 12, 1978. Autopsy showed suffocation from cloth stuffed down his throat. Victim number 27. On November 24, 1978, James Mazzara, 20 years old, an architecture student, told his family he was going for a walk and vanished. Like Frank, his body wasn't in the crawl space but thrown in the river. It was found on December 28, 1978, still bound and strangled, heavily decomposed from weeks in water. Unidentified victims. In the darkness beneath John Wayne Gacy's crawl space, 5 bodies lay without names, without family to identify them, without any records to follow. They were young men, aged between 14 and 27. One wore a plaid shirt, around 14 to 18 years old, lured by promises of work and strangled after the infamous handcuff trick. Another, 15 to 20 years old, was so badly decomposed that his face was unrecognizable. Likely a homeless youth drugged, then killed. Next to him, a skeleton aged 16 to 22 lay near a drainage pipe covered in quicklime, his neck bones broken by a garrote. No one knows who he was or where he came from. Near the west wall was a man, 21 to 27 years old, bearded with signs of manual labor, still strangled like the rest, though his body was relatively preserved. And finally, near the crawl space stairs, a thin frame, 17 to 22 years old, bearing marks of prolonged restraint before death, with a cheap plastic bracelet on his wrist, engraved with letters that no longer mean anything. No DNA match, no missing person file, no one searching. The final victim, Robert Jerome Piest, and the fall of John Wayne Gacy. December 11, 1978, marked the turning point in Gacy's killing spree. Robert Piest, a 15-year-old high school student working part-time at Nissan Pharmacy in Des Plaines, became the 33rd victim and the key to Gacy's downfall. Gacy, then under contract to renovate the pharmacy, seized the opportunity to lure Robert with an offer of $5 an hour, double the minimum wage at the time. Before leaving, Robert told his mother, "I'm just going out to talk to a man named John, then I'll be right back." Those were his last words. According to Gacy's later confession, he took Robert home, performed the handcuff trick, and strangled him when he panicked. He then dumped the body in the Des Plaines River, where it was found in April 1979. Robert's disappearance was reported that same night. Investigators discovered a co-worker's film receipt, Kim Byers, in a jacket left at Gacy's house, pharmacy staff testimonies about Gacy's black Oldsmobile, Robert's fingerprints in Gacy's car. On December 21st, 1978, police raided Gacy's home, uncovering a horrific stench from the crawl space. They exhumed 29 bodies, 26 under the house and 3 in the garage. After his arrest on December 21st, 1978, John Wayne Gacy, America's most notorious serial killer, embarked on a 16-year legal battle ending in lethal injection. This period exposed not only his cruelty, but also the delayed justice and lingering pain of his victims. On February 6, 1980, Gacy's trial began. Prosecutors presented 33 indictments based on the 29 crawlspace bodies and 4 river victims. Defense attorney Sam Amarante argued Gacy suffered blackouts from alcohol and childhood head trauma. The jury rejected this after psychiatrists confirmed he was sane during the killings. On March 13, 1980, Gacy was sentenced to death for 33 murders, the most death sentences in Illinois history at the time. For the next 14 years, Gacy was held at Menard Correctional Center, filing endless appeals and claiming innocence, calling himself the 34th victim. He painted clown artwork, some controversially sold at auctions. On May 10, 1994, Gacy was transferred to Stateville Correctional Center for execution. His last meal: fried chicken, fries, fresh strawberries, and Diet Coke. Before the lethal injection, he showed no remorse, reportedly saying, "Kiss my ass." At 12:58 a.m., he was injected with sodium thiopental, pancuronium bromide, and potassium chloride, ending the life of one of America's most infamous serial killers. Gacy's death closed the darkest chapter in Illinois justice, but the victim's family's pain endures. He remains a warning of humanity's darkness, where mediocrity and evil coexist. Though dead, Gacy's legacy haunts America like an unhealed scar. Thank you for watching until the end. If you found this helpful, please hit subscribe to support me.